It's clear that Harry and I should have finished this before you showed up. William Froley was 64 years old and bitter when he met his I Love Lucy co-star in 1951. After hating her for 6 years, he finally snapped and made her life a living nightmare on set by exploding during rehearsals and suggesting nasty things. William Clement Frawley was born on February 26, 1887, in Burlington, Iowa, into a working-class Irish Catholic family. His father, Michael, was a steamboat captain, and he took revenge by making jokes about her weight and getting her banned from visiting other sets he worked on. She retaliated by refusing to film bedroom scenes with him. What he did to get even would forever haunt television history. William was the second of 4 children. His siblings were John, Paul, and Mary, and his mother Mary was deeply devout. When William's father, Michael, passed away in 1907 at the young age of 21, the family's financial burden increased, and Mary's hold on him tightened. They lived on 6th Street, amid other immigrant families, who were also struggling. William's mother was proud of him for joining the choir at St. Paul's Catholic Church, but things took a dark turn when his secret performances at the Burlington Opera House came to light. William's mother, Mary, had a terrible opinion of show business and sent him a threatening message in which she threatened to bury him rather than watch him become one. William, the actor, was devastated but resolute. He despised the way she exhibited his golden curls, like a doll, and eventually coerced her into cutting them. The bullying from the kids continued, but he refused to let his mother's expectations dampen his strong Irish tenor voice. William found a job as a stenographer at the Union Pacific Railroad in Omaha, a job he detested. While doing the monotonous clerical work, he would wear loud suits, brown derby hats, and even spats, making his co-workers laugh as if he were about to burst into song. After 2 years, he decided he'd had enough and relocated to Chicago, where he took a job as a court reporter, which sounded respectable but wasn't his true calling. In Chicago, William took a chance on a musical comedy called The Flirting Princess at the Lasalle Theater. He was cast, and for the first time in his life, he got paid to sing on stage. However, his mother sent him another scathing letter, and William once again packed up his belongings, this time returning to his railroad job in St. Louis. William continued to pursue his dream, forming a vaudeville act with his brother Paul, and performing together in 1908. He handled the handling, but something had changed after the performance. He felt alive, and believed he had something special. He even claimed later that he was the first to perform My Melancholy Baby, though others dispute that. Despite William's rage, he persisted and, in 1910, sold a script he had written called Fun to a vaudeville agency for more than $500, a fortune equivalent to approximately $15,000 today, marking the first time entertainment profited in a major way. The act was instantly dead after 6 months, when Paul was forced to return to Iowa by their mother. He put the money to good use by relocating to Denver and singing at the Rex Cafe for $23 a week. His brother had left, but he now had evidence that this wasn't a pipe dream. It was a real job. Shortly after, he joined forces with pianist Franz Rath. They performed in San Francisco as a duo called A Man, a Piano, and a Nut William, and they brought their act, complete with songs, jokes, and physical comedy. Eventually William was in his element, but his drinking began to spiral out of control during his 4 years in vaudeville. On November 1, 1914, he married Edna Louise Breaux, who was already a rising star with credits in silent film shorts. The two of them formed Froley and Louise, a singing and comedy act that conquered vaudeville. Their personal lives began to fall apart in 1921, but they continued performing together for 6 more years. By 1927, their relationship had become toxic, and they finally divorced. They were leading acts at the Orpheum and Keith circuits, the pinnacle of vaudeville. Audiences adored them, and their chemistry on stage was flawless. Drinking excessively and pursuing other women, especially possessive Edna, caused William to become bitter and cynical, which influenced his portrayal of female characters in later roles. William Frawley's marriage ended, but the damage remained. At the age of 38, he finally broke through on Broadway on September 24, 1925, when he stepped onto the Mary Mary, a musical comedy that Froley performed in at the Vanderbilt Theater, ran for 197 performances until March 13, 1926. This was an impressive run considering Froley's background. He had spent over a decade navigating the competitive vaudeville scene, first with his brother Paul, and later with his wife Edna Louise Breaux. They were known as Froley, and Louise's vaudeville act was anything but glamorous. It involved frequent travel, low pay, and no guarantee of ever moving up the ladder. In the 1920s, Broadway despised vaudevillians, viewing them as loud, crude, and second-rate. So for Froley, the leap from that world to a prestigious Broadway stage was more than just a career move. It was a leap into the unknown, using his deep, powerful voice, which he had honed in Iowa. Frawley took an even greater risk 7 years later, in 1932, when he returned to Broadway in a role that was utterly different from his previous work. This time, it wasn't a musical or comedy. Instead, he played the role of Owen Ollie, a press agent in 20th Century, a dramatic play written by Ben Heck and Charles MacArthur. Premiered at the Broadhurst Theater on December 29th, the character was a jaded, fast talker who had to give up the songs and slapstick in order to deliver real biting dialogue. He managed it, and his performance went on to prove that he wasn't just good at acting, he could also handle tough dramatic roles. The play was later adapted into the 1934 screwball comedy. The film starring John Barrymore and Carole Lombard was hailed by critics as a groundbreaking example of the genre. However, Frawley's performance in the lead role, which he had originally performed on stage without a script, changed public perception of him and caught the attention of Hollywood scouts. Frawley had signed with Paramount in 1916 and had dabbled in silent films, but he failed to fully realize his potential. Commit to Hollywood until 1932, when he was 45 years old, a typical age for actors, but he was just getting his career started. The film industry was in a rough patch due to the Great Depression and the ongoing talks about a new, tricky format, but Frawley signed a 7-year contract with Paramount anyhow and headed west. Over the next 35 years, Frawley appeared in over 100 films. He wasn't a leading man, but he became the type of actor directors relied on to play tough guys, comedic relief, or even antagonists. It wasn't just a career move, it was a complete reset. He was stepping into a new medium, a new city, and new rules at an age when most people were looking for steady work or retirement. Somehow, he made it work. Wise old men, and he consistently delivered in his film roles. One of his most famous roles came in 1947's Miracle on 34th Street, where he played Charlie Halloran, Judge Harper's political advisor. The part wasn't huge, but it was unforgettable. In a subtle but hilarious scene, Halloran warns the judge that ruling Santa Claus isn't real could ruin his re-election chances. The fact that Frawley was able to bring depth to a brief scene, strike a balance between comedy and seriousness, and make a political statement without preaching by 1951 was demonstrated by his superb performance in that small role. He didn't overact or push himself too hard. Instead, he allowed the lines to do the talking, which captivated both the judge and the audience. After decades of hard work, Frawley's career was crumbling at the age of 64. Despite having appeared in over 100 films, studios in Hollywood were seeking younger talent, and Frawley, who was divorced and living alone in a small apartment, had few options. Frawley had begun his career in vaudeville in 1914, but his career had taken a nosedive since then. Fleming didn't wait for an agent to intervene or an audition. He personally called Lucille Ball, who was taken aback because they barely knew each other, to cast the role of Fred Mertz, a grumpy landlord in a new TV show. That call changed everything. It was the turning point in Desi Arnaz's career. After asking CBS and the sponsors about hiring Froley, everyone said, "He's an alcoholic. You'd be crazy to hire him. There are better, more dependable actors out there." However, Arnaz wasn't convinced. Froley had a reputation for drinking, being difficult on set, and missing work. Desi, on the other hand, saw potential in. It wasn't a joke. Frawley was a serious New York Yankees fan. Despite his dire employment situation, he refused to give up those games and insisted that it be written into his contract if the team made it to the World Series. The role was offered to him, but with strict conditions. Frawley agreed, but he had one demand. He wanted October off if the team made it. It wasn't simply a formality that Frawley's absence from the set became famous in Hollywood. The Yankees won the World Series 7 times, while he was a cast member on I Love Lucy. As a result, the show had to find ways to accommodate him. Writers had to come up with explanations for why Fred wasn't there, whether he was visiting relatives or not, in 2 episodes. Frawley's risky behavior and rocky past caused problems during his absence, but the team put up with it because they valued him. From 1953 to 1957, he became a star. He was nominated for 5 consecutive Emmy Awards for playing Fred Mertz. The industry recognized his work, but he never won. The nominations alone showed how deeply he had connected with the role. Viewers adored Fred Mertz, and Froley had revived his flagging career on television. However, there was a shadowy side to the story. Vivian Vance, who played Ethel Mertz, Fred's wife, had a deep-seated animosity toward Froley that began on day 1, when Vance heard that Froley would be portraying her husband. Vance exclaimed, "That old coot could be my grandfather." She thought he was too old. Regrettably, Froley was present when she said it, and he heard every word. That remark set off a never-ending war. Froley never forgot or forgave. Instead, he took it out on Ethel, suggesting cruel jokes and cruel lines that mocked her appearance. One particularly memorable one was when he said she looked like a sack full. The whole ordeal was intolerable for Vance. She despised acting as if she were married to him and griped ceaselessly that viewers thought she was really married to someone else. As retaliation, he turned their private argument into an episode of the show and even gave her derogatory nicknames behind the scenes, such as "that fat broad" and "the sack of doorknobs." Due to the significant age difference between them, he was 64 and she was 42, she felt like a punchline and would rush through scripts, avoiding any scenes in which they would have to sleep together. This was more than just vanity. She genuinely believed that the pairing was harming her career. As tensions rose on set, Froley would occasionally refuse to leave his dressing room, allowing only the shows. When I Love Lucy ended in 1957, CBS had a new idea for a spin-off starring Fred and Ethel. They were 2 of the most beloved characters, and creator Jess Oppenheimer could persuade him to come back to work. However, Vance began inserting insults into her lines and calling him Old Fat Freddy during scenes, which disrupted filming and made life harder for everyone involved. TV executives thought it could run for years and make a fortune. Froley was Alan, making $7,500 a week on Lucy, which would be around $75,000 today. The spin-off could double or even triple that. He saw an opportunity to be the star for once, so he said yes right away, even though it meant working with Vivian Vance again. Vance didn't simply say no. she slammed the door in Foley's face. CBS even offered her a $50,000 bonus to sign the deal, equivalent to $500,000 today, but she declined. Her hatred of Froley went beyond mere dislike. She confided in her friends that she couldn't stand being in the same room, much alone acting alongside him. At 22 years younger, she felt she had no business continuing to play the role of a narcissistic housewife to a man she found disgusting, despite her training to do so. For Frawley, a serious actress, the spin-off was more of a trap than a dream, and she ultimately decided to walk away. Things took a turn for the worse when Vance eventually joined The Lucy Show. She included a clause in her contract stating that Frawley would never appear on the show. He was officially banned. Frawley became bitter and angry, and he would visit the set just to cause chaos and ruin takes by dropping things. Film canisters or shout from the hallway. Their feud became legendary in Hollywood and followed them around. Both producers wanted to avoid the drama, so they stopped casting them together. As a result, they both lost opportunities at work and potentially made millions from a spin-off. I Love Lucy, on the other hand, made hundreds of millions in. William Frawley, who had recently concluded a 9-year stint as Fred Mertz on I Love Lucy, was cast as Bubasy, the boys' maternal grandfather and housekeeper, in the September 29, 1960, premiere of My Three Sons. The show's syndication would have allowed Fred and Ethel to reap decades' worth of residual income, but instead Bob Froley got the opportunity to portray a character that was more authentic to his Irish heritage. The character, William Michael Francis Aloysius O'Casey, was unlike any he had played before. His full Irish name, William Michael Francis Aloysius, and his charismatic personality matched his heritage. Came from a personal place. Frawley had known Fred McMurray, the show's lead, for decades. The two had worked together in a 1935 film called Car 99. For Frawley, who had become bored with playing phony, this reunion was more than just a job. What people remember most about his time on My Three Sons isn't the performance, but rather what transpired behind the scenes. Barry Froley enjoyed shocking the kids and making them laugh, and Livingston, who joined the cast in 1965 as Ernie, saw it all firsthand. He had a soft place for Barry and his brother Stanley, who also acted on the show. The three of them were like brothers. Livingston also claimed that Froley would say outrageous things around the kids, vulgar stuff that would get someone fired today. As the set became more difficult to manage, Frawley began to act out during rehearsals, reading lines from the script and then yelling out, "Who writes this crap?" And he would treat them like little nephews, rough around the edges, but with genuine affection. His humor was crude, sure, but never cruel. The unusual shooting schedule of My Three Sons, star Fred McMurray had a jam-packed film schedule, required the crew to shoot all of McMurray's scenes in 2 long bursts each year. The rest of the show revolved around this, so when Frawley lost it over the script, it caused major problems. In spite of his strained relationship with Desi Arnaz, Frawley always maintained an air of professionalism on I Love Lucy. However, by 1964, things had escalated to the point where his drinking had become an issue on stage, negatively impacting the show. Directors would yell at him when he dozed off during a scene, and writers scrambled to find solutions. Cut, and figure out how to continue without him. The crew began writing episodes without Bob or filming scenes from angles that barely showed him in case he didn't make it. Eventually, in 1965, the producers decided to replace him and cast William Demarest as Uncle Charlie, Bub's brother. They subtly eased the transition by claiming Bub had gone to see a sick relative, but everyone on set knew the truth. Foley was nearly 70 years old, and his health was deteriorating due to his drinking. A year after he left the show, he died of a heart attack, but Barry Livingston still held him in high regard, despite all the bad days. His roughness, while occasionally inappropriate, was never hateful. He seemed to genuinely care about the kids on set and loved sharing stories from his vaudeville days. Barry believed that the man people saw on screen wasn't an act. It was the real William Froley. William Frawley passed away on March 3, 1966, just 5 days after his 79th birthday. He frequently spent evenings alone at the movies, as he had done for years. He rarely left his apartment and rarely interacted with others. After the film ended, he stepped out onto the street, took a few steps, and then collapsed. A sudden and severe heart attack struck him without warning. Bystanders hurried him to Hollywood Receiving Hospital, but a final scene that seemed to echo his whole life, public success, private silence, was his declaration of death upon arrival. It was a lonely end for a man who had once made millions laugh. No friends or family were there. Just the lights of Hollywood, the city that had made him a star, and the boulevard where his name had once meant something, marked his lonely end. Vance, who played Ethel Mertz, his on-screen wife, on I Love Lucy, was out dining with friends when she heard the news. The two had worked together for 6 years, but their relationship was tainted with animosity. Vance never hid her hatred for Froley. She believed he was too old, grumpy, and impossible to collaborate with. Upon hearing the news that he had passed away, she allegedly smiled, raised her glass, and declared, "Champagne for everyone." She proceeded to purchase drinks for the entire restaurant. News of this incident spread rapidly among Hollywood insiders, who were already aware of their feud, but the public celebration of his death escalated things significantly. The depth of her animosity was revealed when she declined a spin-off series about Fred and Ethel years ago, all in an effort to avoid working with him again. Despite this, the unexpected turnout at his funeral shocked everyone. Froley was known for his difficult personality, fighting with directors, ignoring producers, and not caring about making friends. However, at San Fernando, a large gathering gathered at Mission Cemetery to pay their respects. Many were industry professionals who had worked with Froley for decades, and despite his brusque personality, they respected his talent. One of the few who genuinely liked him, D'Arnaz, purchased a full-page ad in the trade papers that featured a photo of Froley with a black border and 3 words in Spanish, "Buenas no amigo Arnaz." Along with Fred McMurray and producer Don Fader's son, Lucille Ball, who had her own rocky relationship with Froley, served as a pallbearer. In a moving tribute, Ball referred to Froley as "one of my dearest friends," and lamented the loss of the industry's best character actors that day. Unfortunately, the funeral took an unexpected turn when a figure stood by the side of the casket. It turned out to be Vivian Vance, the same woman who had celebrated her husband's death with champagne days earlier. Her expression at the funeral was expressionless, with some witnesses detecting remorse and others suggesting guilt. Perhaps she was seeking closure, but her arrival startled all. It was the type of event that would be discussed for years to come. Her motivations for coming could have ranged from making peace with a guy she despised to acknowledging that he had played a role in her life despite everything.